Okay, so welcome back to this next video in which we are discussing the transduction of painful stimuli. Okay, right, so we were just discussing the anatomy of nociceptor entry into the spinal cord, basically. So we just called this process of grey matter that extends posteriorly the dorsal grey matter horn. Okay, right, so basically the nociceptors which are coming in through this mixed spinal nerve here, so this is the mixed spinal nerve, and we agreed that we could call this the L1 mixed spinal nerve, which just means it's at vertebral level L1. Okay, so this is the mixed spinal nerve. What's going to happen is the nociceptor is going to come in through the mixed spinal nerve, and they always go posteriorly in the dorsal root. So basically all primary somatosensory neurons go in the dorsal root. So everything coming into the spinal cord goes down the dorsal root, and then everything coming out of the spinal cord, so all the motor neurons which are sending instructions out to targets, those will come out in the ventral root, basically. So our nociceptor is going to go down the dorsal root. Now, we need to discuss something about nociceptors before we go any further. Okay, and this, in fact, again, can be generalized to all of the primary somatosensory neurons. Basically, primary somatosensory neurons are what are known as pseudo-unipolar neurons. Okay, and what this means is that they are kind of unipolar because they only have actually one process coming off their cell body, but they actually do have two processes, so it's difficult. Okay, so let me show you what I mean by this. So this is the cell body of the primary somatosensory neuron here. And basically the cell body will only have a single process coming off it, okay? That's why they're called unipolar, because they only have a single process coming off the cell body. Uni means one, okay? So they've got a single process coming off their cell body. The problem is this then divides into two separate processes. Okay, so one axon which will go and innervate the peripheral tissue, called the peripheral axon, and then another axon which will go centrally into the central nervous system and deliver the action potential into the central nervous system, and this is called the central axon. So they're pseudo-unipolar because even though they strictly speaking are unipolar, functionally it's as though they're bipolar. They've got two processes, basically. Okay, so the cell bodies of these primary somatosensory neurons are always within this dorsal root ganglion. Okay, so a ganglion is the name for a collection of cell bodies which is outside of the central nervous system. So when you have a collection of cell bodies within the central nervous system, that's called a nucleus, okay, or grey matter for that matter. Okay, but when you've got a collection of cell bodies that is outside of the central nervous system, that is called a ganglion. Now, these ganglia are all associated with the dorsal roots, so these are called the dorsal root ganglia, and this is an example of a dorsal root ganglion. Okay, and for short, the dorsal root ganglion will be abbreviated to DRG, so D for dorsal, R for root, G for ganglion. Okay, right, so here is the peripheral axon going out and innervating the skin, and then it will have a central axon which is going to go into the spinal cord. Okay, now, how does this central axon enter the spinal cord? But before we just answer that question, I would just like to impress on you something that I at least find quite amazing, which is that this little cell has its cell body in the dorsal root ganglion, which sits just alongside the spinal cord, basically, within the vertebral column, okay? And its peripheral axon will go out through the mixed spinal nerve. It'll then go through all sorts of different plexuses and go into some sort of peripheral nerve, and will then go off and innervate the skin, and it's the same cell that is spaced out potentially over meters and meters, basically. So I find that quite incredible. Okay, and I hope you do too. Right, then what happens is this central axon is going to go into the spinal cord. It's going to continue on through the dorsal root, and then it's going to get to this first portion here. And this is not part of the dorsal horn. This isn't actually a portion of grey matter. So this little snip here that's right at the back of the dorsal horn, this actually isn't grey matter. Okay, this is actually a little section of white matter, and it's known as the tract of Lizauer, okay, or Lizauer's zone. So this is the tract of Lizauer. Okay, right, and what's going to happen is the central axon of this nociceptive neuron here is going to split it into many different branches. So it's going to branch out again. This central axon will split into loads of little branches, and these branches will go into the tract of Lizauer. Now, some of them will go up, some of them will go down, some of them will stay at the same level, and then they will go into the grey matter. So each nociceptor is going to give a little span of central axon endings, basically, which will enter the spinal cord at different levels, basically. So, showing this on this picture here, or in fact, let me draw a better picture than that one. So if we have our little picture of the spinal cord here, okay, like so, then we have the spinal cord like so, and we know that right at the back of the spinal cord we have these two tracts known as the tract of Lizauer, so one there and one there. Okay, so that's roughly their positions. So we have a right one and a left one. So here's the left one, here's the right one. And then what's going to happen is this central axon of this nociceptor neuron is coming into the spinal cord, and it's going to give off branches which will go up and down in the tract of Lizauer. They won't spread out too far, you know, and then what will happen is they'll go into the grey matter, and this will be happening on the other side as well. Now, the importance of this is that each nociceptor is going to innervate secondary neurons at a variety of different levels around where it actually entered the spinal cord. So it's sort of spread out, if you like. Okay, and the axons of this central axon, the separate branches of this central axon, are going to move up and down within this special zone at the back of the grey matter, known as the tract of Lizauer. Okay, right. So now to go any further, we need to talk about the way that the grey matter of the spinal cord is divided up in a little bit more detail. So firstly, let me add another landmark onto here. So running down the centre of the spinal cord here, this is known as the central canal of the spinal cord. Okay, and that's another landmark. And this nicely divides the grey matter into two halves, the left half here and the right half here. Okay, right, so what we now want to do is take this right half, remember we're patients right always, this right half of the grey matter, and divide it up into what are known as Rexed's laminae. Okay, so a way of dividing up the grey matter of the spinal cord is through what are known as Rexed's laminae. So basically we'll start off with Rexed laminae 1 to 6. There are 10 overall, but Rexed laminae 1 to 6 are extremely easy. Then the final 4 are a little bit more complicated. So basically Rexed laminae 1 to 6 are within the dorsal horn of the grey matter of the spinal cord. So let me show this. So here's Rexed laminae 1, here's Rexed laminae 2, Rexed laminae 3, Rexed laminae 4, Rexed laminae 5, and then Rexed laminae 6 there. Okay, so let me colour code these. So that little strip that's now in vivid purple, that's going to represent Rexed laminae 1. Okay, so here's Rexed laminae 1. Then next up we have in green here, after the vivid purple one, that's Rexed laminae 2. Okay, and we're going to continue it on. We might as well colour code it, it'll look a lot prettier if we do. Then we'll have Rexed laminae 3 in orange after the green one. So here is Rexed laminae 3, and they often do use Roman numerals for the Rexed laminae just to be pretentious. Okay, so that's Rexed laminae 3. Then we've got Rexed laminae 4, which I think I'll do in blue. Okay, so don't confuse that with the tract of Lizauer. Okay, so that's Rexed laminae 4. Then after Rectus laminae 4, you have Rectus laminae 5, which I'll do in turquoise, and then Rectus laminae 6, which I'll do in red. Okay, so they're in red. So let's just complete those ones up with the labelling. So Rectus laminae 5, and then finally Rectus laminae 6. Okay, so 6 was in red, oops, and Rectus laminae 5 was in turquoise. Okay, so those were the easy ones. Now the final 4 are a little bit more complicated, so we'll start with the 10th one. Okay, 7 is the most complicated. We'll leave 7 right till the last. We'll first do 10. Okay, so number 10 is between this midline here, okay, and this line that I've drawn here. So we'll have 10 in pink. Okay, so this is Rectus laminae 10, nicely shown in pink there. So this is 10. Now what's the symbol for 10 in Roman numerals? X. Okay, so that's Rectus laminae 10.